The moment she smiled, something inside him shifted like a quiet truth he had been avoiding for years had suddenly found its voice. He didn't know her, didn't understand why her words felt so heavy. But when she leaned forward slightly and said, "You're not here by accident," it didn't sound like a guess. It sounded like certainty. Ethan Caldwell hadn't planned to be there that evening. In fact, everything about his life over the past 3 years had been carefully designed to avoid moments exactly like this. After losing his wife in a sudden accident, he had shut down every door that led to emotional connection. His world had narrowed down to routine, responsibility, and the quiet duty of raising his 7-year-old son, Noah. Love, for him, had become something distant, something that belonged to a different version of himself. That night, the city skyline stretched behind them, soft and blurred in the fading daylight. The cafe terrace buzzed gently with conversations, laughter, and clinking cups, but Ethan felt detached from it all. He had only agreed to this blind date because his sister insisted, telling him that life wasn't meant to be lived in silence. He had resisted at first, but eventually gave in, not out of hope, but out of exhaustion from saying no to everything. Across from him sat a woman who didn't seem nervous, didn't seem unsure, and most strangely, didn't seem like a stranger. Her name was Ilara Bennett, and there was something about...
This is Legacy Talks, where every story carries a message about courage, kindness, and the legacy we leave behind. If you enjoy stories that inspire and move you, press like, share this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Legacy Talks for more
the way she
powerful
held
talks
herself
and
calm,
stories.
Steady. Almost knowing that made Ethan feel like he was the one being understood, even before he had spoken a word. He tried to brush off her words at first, offering a polite smile, but his mind kept circling back to them. Not here by accident. What did she mean by that? Blind dates were, by definition, accidental meetings arranged by others. There was nothing meaningful about them, at least. That's what he believed. But Ilara didn't treat it that way. She didn't rush into small talk or awkward questions. Instead, she spoke slowly, thoughtfully, as if she had all the time in the world. She asked about Noah, not just his age or school, but what made him laugh, what he was afraid of, what his dreams were. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan found himself answering honestly, not with rehearsed responses, but with real emotion. As he spoke about his son, his voice softened, and the walls he had built so carefully began to crack. He talked about the nights when Noah would ask about his mother, and how he never knew what to say. He admitted how he felt like he was failing, like he was trying to be both parents, and somehow falling short of both roles. Ilara listened without interrupting. There was no pity in her eyes, no forced sympathy, just understanding. And when she finally spoke, her words carried a quiet strength that surprised him. She told him that grief doesn't mean the end of love, it means love has changed its form. That holding on to pain doesn't honor the past, it only dims the future. And somehow, in the simplest way, she made him feel like he wasn't broken, just unfinished. Time seemed to blur as they sat there. The sky darkened, lights flickered on around them, and the city transformed into a glowing backdrop. But Ethan barely noticed. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about what he had lost, he was thinking about what might still be possible. Yet, just as that fragile hope began to grow, doubt crept in. It always did. He leaned back slightly, his expression tightening as he reminded himself that this was temporary. A single evening didn't change reality. He still had responsibilities, fears, and a heart that wasn't ready to risk breaking again. He told himself that Ilara was kind, insightful, maybe even extraordinary, but she was still a stranger, and strangers didn't get to rewrite his story. But then she said something that made his breath catch. She spoke about loss, not in a distant, theoretical way, but in a way that felt personal. She shared how she had once loved someone deeply, someone she thought she would spend her life with. And then, without warning, that future disappeared. Not through death, but through choices that couldn't be undone. She talked about the emptiness that followed, the silence that felt louder than any noise, and the slow, painful process of learning to live again. But what struck Ethan the most was not her panic, was her resilience. She hadn't closed herself off. She hadn't let fear define her. Instead, she chose to remain open, even when it was difficult. And that's when he began to understand what she meant. "You're not here by accident" wasn't about fate in some grand, magical sense. It was about choice, about the courage to show up, even when it's easier to stay hidden. About two people, carrying their own broken pieces, choosing to sit across from each other and try again. The realization hit him harder than he expected. For so long, Ethan had believed that moving forward meant letting go of the past, and that terrified him. But sitting there with Ilara, he began to see it differently. Moving forward didn't erase what he had lost, it gave it meaning. It allowed love to continue, not as a memory locked in pain, but as something that could grow in new ways. The night deepened, and eventually, they stood to leave. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden confession, just a quiet understanding that something important had begun. As they walked toward the street, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. Hope, fear, uncertainty, but also a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't sure what would happen next, and for once, he didn't feel the need to control it. Ilara paused before they parted, her expression soft but certain. She didn't ask for promises, didn't push for answers. Instead, she simply reminded him that life has a way of bringing people together at the exact moment they need it most, not by accident, but by timing we rarely understand. And then she left. Ethan stood there for a long moment, watching as she disappeared into the city lights. The world around him felt different, not because anything had changed, but because he had. That night, when he returned home, Noah was asleep on the couch, a small toy clutched in his hand. Ethan knelt beside him, gently brushing his hair back, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel overwhelmed by the future. Instead, he felt ready to face it. Over the following days, something subtle but powerful began to shift. He found himself more present, more patient, more open. He laughed a little easier, listened a little more deeply, and slowly, the heaviness he had carried for so long began to lift. He didn't rush into anything with Ilara. They met again, then again, each time building something steady and real. There were no grand gestures, no unrealistic expectations, just two people learning to trust again, one step at a time. And in that quiet, gradual way, Ethan realized that healing doesn't come from forgetting the past, it comes from allowing yourself to live beyond it. If this story touched your heart even a little, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and let it remind you that no matter how broken life feels, there is always a path forward. Before we reach the end, I want you to comment something simple but powerful. I choose to move forward. Because sometimes, that single choice is where everything begins. Ethan often thought back to that first moment, the smile, the words, the feeling he couldn't explain. And now, he understood it completely. He wasn't there by accident. He was there because, deep down, he was ready.